The co-owner of the Old Oak Frame House here in LaGrange on Main Street.
And my name is Bill Amline, and I have a company called WJL Design Associates.
Hey, what can you tell us about the formation of the county?
Well, the county was formed as a county. Its charter was presented in 1824, and at that time the county seat was Westport, Kentucky. That remained the county seat into approximately 1828, when there was a referendum in the county, and they decided to move the county seat to LaGrange because a man by the name of William Berry Taylor had donated 50 acres to create the town of LaGrange, and in his stipulation there was to be the county seat in LaGrange. In 1828 it moved back to Westport, and then 1838 it moved back to LaGrange again.
Kept the roads
Yeah, it did. It went back and forth. The courthouse you now see was built in 1874. The one earlier, prior to that, burnt down in that same year. Luckily, though, all the courthouse records were saved from the fire, and we still have all the original courthouse records from the original beginning and onset as this being the county seat.
LaGrange, the word means the farm, does it not? It comes from the French words, the farm. And LaGrange was, the city, Oldham County was farmed from Trimble, am I correct, Henry and Shelby, and Jefferson, all parts of those counties put together became Oldham County. And in what? In 1824. And the original land grant by William Berry Taylor, his relatives are still living in downtown LaGrange, just 2 blocks from the courthouse square. People would want to see the Rob Morris Memorial home, and it is only 2 blocks from the courthouse square. He is the founder of the Eastern Star, and they would certainly want to see the W.D. Griffith home. One of the wonderful attractions out here would be the actual courthouse square itself, because it is completely intact as it stands and has stood for the past 100 years. A problem that we currently face is the possible demolition of the existing jail structure for the construction of a 71-bed jail. Which will be a regional facility. It will absorb the major part of the west courthouse lawn, and we feel that this will be visually detrimental to the square and to the downtown historic flavor of the historic district. That is our major concern at this time.
Owenton, the county seat of Owen County. Owen County population 9,398. Area square miles 354. Rank 43rd. Owen County is located in the 4th Congressional District.
To my left, we have a local historian who has graciously volunteered to answer some questions for us. Would you please introduce yourself?
I'm Patricia Wolcott, and I've been living in Owen County about 8 years.
Okay. What can you tell us about the formation of the county?
Well, it was formed out of Gallatin, Henry, Scott, and Franklin in 1819, and the first county seat was at Hessler, which we call Hessler. It was called Hesslerville because that was the center of the county at that point. About 1820, they took a little more land from Gallatin County, and that moved the center of the county up, and so they moved the county seat to Owenton.
Okay. How did it get its name, the county?
Colonel Abraham Owen, who never lived in this county, he was from Shelby County, was in the Indian campaigns of 1790. He earned his colonelship at that point, and it was named for Colonel Abraham Owen.
Okay. How old is the courthouse behind us?
Well, this is the third one that Owen County has had. The first one, of course, was log, and it was at Hessler. The second one was log, and it was here in Owenton. It was built in 1858, and the architect was W.E. Cook. It was just one room downstairs at that point, and in 1868 they added the 2 wings on each side. It's been renovated several times.
Okay. Are there other historical events that took place in Owen County that you know of?
Well, there were two Confederate camps here. Camp Marshall was at Lusby's Mill, and then there was one on Vallandingham's Farm, which is out the highway. This courthouse was also used as the Union headquarters during the Civil War. It's mostly farms, and it always has been. The Virginians came here because their land was depleted. Well, this is it is now an historic district. And of course, the courthouse has been on the National Register since 1977. We do have the jail that was built in 1878 that is in back of the courthouse, and we would hope that in the future our historical society could obtain the jail and make it into a museum. We would hope that, being a historic district, the architecture would draw people to the community.
Can you tell us about that particular book you're holding on the history of Owen County?
Yes, Dr. Thomas Clark wrote the introduction, and it is The History of Owen County, Kentucky by Miriam Sidebottom Houchins. She recently passed away, but it is one of the best county histories that have been written. It's complete. She had different people write certain segments, like the school teachers would write about the schools and the ministers about the churches, and it was sort of a grassroots type thing. It is not a scholarly work. It's something that's very enjoyable to read, not just facts.
I have a question. Why does it say Sweet Owen?
You would ask that. I believe it was John Breckinridge, about 1850, when he came here on one of his campaign tours. He spoke from the balcony of one of our historic homes, and he coined the phrase Sweet Owen, and from then on everybody has called Owen County Sweet Owen. There is a little community called Sweet Owen.
Okay. What can you tell us about, you had mentioned earlier, two colleges that had been established here?
Colleges, of course, before the Civil War, let's say, as just a time frame, were what we would call high schools, higher education. There were two in Owen County, which is rather unusual, but these people, being Virginians, they took great stock in education. There was one Concord College at New Liberty, and there was one called Harrisburg Academy, which is out on the highway on the way to Sparta. And they closed down, probably 1870s. There were no more colleges. But this was also a community of one-room schoolhouses. There were probably, 100 one-room schoolhouses up into the 1900s here. And for that reason, there are many, many teachers. People are either farmers or teachers here.
What about churches in the county?
That's it. This is a basically Baptist area, and there always have been and are now many Baptist churches. Very early one was in New Liberty, the Baptist Church of the Twins, and it was established in 1801. There was one at Mountain Island, which incidentally, we also have a book on the Mountain Island Church, which is no more. There is no church there now. There is a very interesting story connected with Mountain Island. The man who owned the property left it to his slaves. And of course the people didn't, this was very early, and the people didn't take to that very, very well at all. He freed his slaves and left them all the property, and there was a great court fight over it. But the slaves won, and the property is still in their families at this time. It's out by New Columbus.
I understand that you're not a former native of Owen County. What brought you here?
Well, my husband and I have always wanted to have a farm, and he was a salesman with a steel company in Newport. When it closed, he decided that he just sort of do his thing on the farm, and so we moved here, and we have thoroughly enjoyed it. There's not a nicer place in the world.
Okay, thank you.
Falmouth, the county seat of Pendleton County. Pendleton County population, 10,949. Area square miles, 281. Rank, 74th. Pendleton County is located in the 4th Congressional District.
We're standing outside the Pendleton County Courthouse. The county seat is Falmouth, Kentucky. To my left, we have two gentlemen who have volunteered to answer some questions for us about their area. First, would you introduce yourself?
My name's Jim Thaxton. I'm with Thaxton's Canoe Trails.
Okay.
My name is Marvin Sullivan. I'm the Pendleton County Circuit Court Clerk.
Okay. Marvin, what can you tell us about the courthouse itself, how it functions?
Our courthouse has I think, a very interesting history. A lot of our records, and I'm trying to do a little bit more indexing and things that'll make it more accessible and easier for people to come in and actually look at records. Some of the earliest ones are 1809, and these are records that you can still, open up and look, and these are the exact writings of, the clerks that were back then. The courthouse itself, as it stands there, was erected in 1884. Now, from what I understand, there was an earlier building that went back even before that, but the courthouse itself it was erected in 1884, and then in 1975 we had another annex that's where my office is now. But quite an interesting history. We were talking earlier about, I can now understand, I was a former English teacher, and I can now understand a little bit, the influence that the Virginian colonies had on Kentucky, and you can see it in the records, and there's some interesting stories that I'm working on. I hope to get them all together one of these days. Okay. Pendleton County was formed in 1798 from parts of Bracken and Campbell County, and our records in the courthouse are fairly accurate from about 1808 on up. Some of the earlier records, you'll find that they kind of dovetail together, but they are fairly accurate. A lot of them are disputes over land, and I know even some of our bail bonds, I've gone back and where they would, maybe a person wouldn't have any money and they would put up maybe a slave that they had in their possession. But we have a lot of history in the area, and the area itself, we're kind of the northern counties kind of look to us. I guess we have the Cincinnati influence just a little bit. They look at us as sort of like hillbillies, and then the southern counties, the bigger counties, they look at us as we're kind of land between the big cities, I guess you might say. But we enjoy it. I really enjoy the area and love it.
Okay. What is the major industries in the area?
Our major industry, I think, is probably agricultural. That's why right now we're going through a big change. The tobacco and beef, and we used to be a lot of dairy. In fact, there used to be a lot of honey. This used to be where they produced a lot of honey, and we had a lot of sheep. A lot of those things have, since farming is kind of specialized, and with agricultural products the way they are, we don't have any big industry. We got a few small factories, and we're hoping to get some others. But our largest factory, the Dr. Scholl's factory here a few years ago, of course, it closed down, and it sort of hurt us a little bit. And we're hoping to get a lot of things. I think Jim will talk about it a little bit later. We think we got a tremendous potential as far as a recreational area. We have a nice state park, Kincaid Lake State Park, and the rivers coming through the area, and since we are rural, it's about 25 minutes away from some of the big areas where you can get out and actually have some quietness and peace and tranquility. So we're hoping to explore that too.
What can you tell us about tourism as far as the county goes itself?
In terms of tourism, what we're looking to do with our business is draw in people to go canoeing throughout the summer months. We have every summer a professional theater, which Marvin participated in last year, and this year they're going to do the production Fiddler on the Roof. He'll be running through late June into the 2nd of August. Each year in October, the first weekend in October, we have the Kentucky Wool Festival, which is a real pure type of festival. It's not a flea market. It's handcrafts, it's artisans, and it's good music, and it's excellent food. And it's a good time for everybody throughout the area to come in and just enjoy country life.
Okay. Do either one of you have anything else you'd like to share?
Well, I'd like to add something that what Marvin is saying on some of the things we'd like to see done with our county. I think the road issue is something that we really need to address. This county is looked upon from northern Kentuckians as out of the way, yet because 27 is considered to be a crooked road to get to us. The new AA highway will certainly help us. The access to 75 via a straightening of 22 would be a big asset to get industry and tourism into this area. And the Tourism Planning Commission is looking at a four-season type festival for this area. Something in the winter. We already have something in the order of a Christmas activity. Something to celebrate the red bud blossoming here in about a couple weeks. And these hills become live with just all kinds of colors, from the dogwoods and the redbuds and wasp, as you noticed before. And then we have something looking to do something in the summer. We have the Pendleton County Days already, and we're going to hope to expand on those, and then back to the Wool Festival in the fall. Well, my name's, again, Jim Thaxton, and I run Thaxton's Canoe Trails along with the rest of my family. It's a canoe rental service. Canoe livery is what it's called. We rent canoes and offer trips on the South Licking, the Middle Fork of the Licking, and the Main Licking rivers throughout the area here and throughout Pendleton County.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Shelbyville, the county seat of Shelby County. Shelby County population, 23,968. Area square miles, 385. Rank, 38. Shelby County is located in the 6th Congressional District.
Dorothy McGinnis.
And what kind of work are you doing here?
Well, I'm a volunteer for the clerk to help with the older records in what they call the archives department of the county clerk's office. And we answer the inquiries that come in about people's ancestry dating from 1792, when we became a county, the same time that Kentucky became a state. And we have our old records dating back to 1792, which is wonderful, considering that so many courthouses have either burned or have lost a lot of their records, but ours have been preserved down through the years by people like Sue Carroll Prairie, who is our clerk, and take the interest in seeing that these records are kept and available to the people who want to see what has been preserved of our history. Of course, everything's based on history, I think.
You're right.
And if you do away with history, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And history will preserve your background, and it'll show the progression of the whole area. This was an agricultural area up until the middle of last century. And the families that came in here, one item I'd like to mention that people might not know is that in 1820s, middle 1820s, there were more people in this county than there have been up until the last census. And the families were large. It was an agricultural county. It wasn't enough land for everybody to make a living on. So they began to migrate to across the river to Indiana, and then from there to Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, various states. So you'll find the descendants of the early pioneers that were here all over the Midwest and the West. We get letters from all over the United States, even a few from back east, people that are still back there. And I've had correspondence from Alaska, Canada, and Puerto Rico. I believe that's all I can remember outside of the United States.
Okay, when the county was formed, how did it get its name?
From its first governor, Isaac Shelby was the first governor of Kentucky. And of course, Kentucky was formed from Virginia in 1792. And at that time, there were three major areas. And the south central part was called Lincoln County, and the eastern part was Fayette County, and the north central was Jefferson County. Shelby County was one of three cut off of Jefferson at the time the state was formed in 1792. So we sort of, anything before that in this area was, of course, people were here before that, will be recorded in Jefferson County in the courthouse there in Louisville. And of course, gradually all the counties were formed. We were the 15th state of the nation. And the counties were cut off of that gradually until we have now, what, 120 counties? Is that right? That's right. I'm not up to all the present history as much as I am the older history. And it was a pioneer time, and it was a rough time. The Boones were here, and they set up the Boone Station out here on the creek just north of town, but Indians still harassed them, and so they had to close the station, and they moved the people from that station down into Jefferson County to the Beargrass Station. But it didn't deter people from coming across the mountains or down the river from Pennsylvania, and that's where my ancestors came from. It's from Virginia and Pennsylvania. You want to add anything?
How about introducing yourself?
I'm Sue Carol Perry, and I'm the county clerk in Shelby County, and Dorothy, I'm just real fortunate to have her because, like she said, she's a volunteer, and most all of it has got to be in her head. I mean, you just heard her tell. I didn't know half of the stuff she just told us.
What do you want to know? She takes care of all the current business, and you know what that is. It is really, it just swallows you when you get in there, the paperwork and the computers and all of that. So I'd rather do what I'm doing than what she's doing.
Let me ask you about, maybe we can pull these two bits of information together. We're trying to help each county promote tourism, and also I understand that there's a particular facility here in the county. Could you tell us about that, as well as what people would like to come and see in the county as a tourist site?
We're very fortunate that we have a drawing card with the Wakefield Scarce Gallery that is located in the old Science Hill Girls School that was established in 1825 by the Tevis family, and then carried on by the Pointer family until 1936 when it was closed. It is a lovely gallery and has gorgeous antiques from all over, especially from England. And people come here when they have their Christmas showing every winter for in bus loads and car loads and so forth. So that adds a lot to the county's income and its publicity too. So we feel like that is one reason we want to preserve as much of the history of the county, because when they come they say what a beautiful town this is, and they like the dogwoods that have been planted by former mayor, and they like the old buildings, and they like to see them preserved. And so we're trying to get people more interested in keeping the old buildings instead of tearing them down and putting up something modern that won't last nearly as long as these old buildings have lasted.
You know, Shelby County has always been really thought of as a farming county. I don't know if we still are, but at one time I think we were the biggest milk producing county. But in the last 10 or 12 years, we've had a lot of small factories to pop up. We have an industrial foundation, and we have an industrial park, and we've had several just recently. We've had the bud plant that's announced they were coming. Fortunately, Shelby County's never really had a low unemployment rate. So I think that this bud plant's not only going to help us, it's going to help Spencer and probably Henry and Anderson County, the counties surrounding us.
What can you tell us about the church across the street?
Well, the Methodist Church was one of the earliest churches in the county. The very first one was out in the country, of course, that they called Rockbridge Methodist Church. I believe that was one of the first ones, and there were several out in the country. But when they established this early in the last century, in the 1800s, it was in this general location. And the building that we have here now is one of the oldest church buildings that we have in town, along with possibly the Episcopal Church and the Catholic Church. And several years ago, they had a disastrous fire that gutted it practically the day after Christmas. But the Methodists and the townspeople and everybody were eager to keep the church here on this spot because of its historical value. So they were able to rebuild in the same church outer building. Now they have not yet gotten their steeple up, but they have everything else is on the outside is like it was at the time that it was finally completed. And it has been a very progressive church. It's a very warm, friendly, growing church in this community.
Taylorsville, the county seat of Spencer County. Spencer County population, 6,175. Area square miles, 192. Rank, 106. Spencer County is located in the 2nd Congressional District.
Behind us, we have the Spencer County Courthouse. To my right, we have a lady whose name is Mary Frances Brown, who's a local historian, is currently doing research and will be compiling a book in regards to the county. We'd like to ask her a few questions about the county itself. Mrs. Brown, when was the county formed?
It was formed in 1824, January of 1824, out of the counties of Shelby and Nelson and Bullitt. Just a small section off of Bullitt. Okay. But the large part from Salt River northward to Shelbyville was in Shelby County. The land south of Salt River was Nelson County, and it was divided off of those ends.
Okay. Who is the county named after?
Well, that's an interesting story. I'd wondered that for many years, and this fall, we all knew that it was named after a man named Captain Spear Spencer, a famous Indian fighter, but that's about all we knew. Spencer County, 1824, named for Spear Spencer. So I wondered, who was Spear Spencer? Why was he chosen? And I knew he was an Indian fighter, and he came into this area through Nelson County, and then he moved further north over into the Shelby County area, and he was enlisted in the Cornstalk Militia, what was the Kentucky State Militia, in the years during the 1790s in Shelby County. And finally he moved on to Corydon, Indiana, and became quite a good friend of William Henry Harrison, who was also an Indian fighter and later President of the United States. And he was killed in Indian battle at Tippecanoe. He is buried on the ground where he fell. There's a magnificent marker at where the battle was fought, and then the 7 officers who were killed there each have tombstones and the location on which they fell. It's most inspirational and beautiful. I saw it in the fall of the year about the time the battle was fought. The battle was the 11th of November, and I saw it the last week in October, so the coloring of the leaves would have been similar, and it just a real inspiring place. And the more I hear about Spear Spencer, the prouder I am of him, that he was the man who was chosen. And you see, he was a contemporary of the people who were in the legislature at that time, and I'm sure many of them knew him, and is the reason his name would come up. That's the way I see him, and I'm proud of him for what I've learned of him.
Okay, thank you. What can you tell us about the age of the courthouse, and did other courthouses stand here prior to it?
Pardon me. There have been 4 courthouses, but there was one in this area right in here, the very first one. And then there was another one that I have never been able to find a deed on, but it was in the square. But that one burned. And then the third one was built over here on this site. And then it burned in 1913, and this one was completed in 1914. I have to say that in this research that I have grown to respect the pioneer woman above practically any women in history, those who came westward. They came for various reasons. Many of their husbands were Revolutionary War men with grants, and many of them were veterans of the French and Indian War, and those people moved in here. And for many years, we have been under the impression that everybody came over the Cumberland Gap, but that is a false conception. Many people from western Virginia did, but more came down the river, the Ohio River, to the falls. And there, because of the falls, they had to be piloted around that. And there were river pilots who did that. These men came south on flatboats. And of course, the danger that they were exposed to, either on foot or on the river from Indians, was constant. And we had a tragic massacre over on Cox's Creek, which is so close to Spencer County. And so many of those people who were well, it was called Kinslow Station, but it was meant it was in the Cox's Creek neighborhood. And there was a fort at Cox's Creek, and so many of those people I found in the deeds have settled this county and Shelby County.
Lexington, the county seat of Fayette County. Fayette County population, 212,068. Area square miles, 285. Fayette County is located in the 6th Congressional District.
Mr. Cooper, what do you do in Lexington?
I'm the curator of modern political manuscripts at the University of Kentucky Library, and also teach a course each semester in Kentucky history.
Okay. What can you tell us about the formation of Fayette County?
Well, this place was actually named before it was settled. In the spring of 1775, a group of explorers and hunters from Pennsylvania camped nearby here. While they were here, they received word of the Battle of Lexington in Massachusetts in the American Revolution. So they decided that this place should be named Lexington. It wasn't until 4 years later that there is actually what you would call a permanent settlement here. In April of 1779, Robert Patterson, who was an ensign in the militia at Fort Herod, was ordered by the Virginia government to bring 25 people and establish an outpost or a garrison somewhere north of the Kentucky River. They selected this site. As a matter of fact, erected the first blockhouse and later a fort just down the street here from us at the corner of what is now Mill and Main. And that was the permanent origins of Lexington.
Okay. What can you tell us about the courthouse itself?
It was patterned somewhat after the earlier forts that had been built in Kentucky already, some of which have been reconstructed, the one at Fort Herod, the one at Boonesboro, and so forth. In the very beginning, because of Indian problems and so forth, most of the inhabitants lived within the stockade, although that would quickly change and dwellings would begin to be built around the perimeter.
Okay. What other historical pieces could you share with us about historical figures of the past?
If I could deter you a moment, I should have mentioned, really, in talking about the formation of Lexington, that the town is actually formed before the county. It was not until 1780, the next year after the founding of Lexington, that Fayette County was established. And that originally, well, since 1776, all of what we now know as Kentucky, with the exception of the Jackson Purchase, which was added later, was Kentucky County, a one-county unit for administrative purposes of Virginia. In 1780, the Virginia Assembly divided Kentucky into 3 counties, Fayette, Lincoln, and Jefferson. Fayette, at that time, encompassed about 1/3 of what is now the entire state, everything north and east of the Kentucky River. And the county was named Fayette after the Marquis de Lafayette, who was the most influential and dedicated French supporter of the Americans in the Revolution. Of course, you have the ones which are well known, like Henry Clay, who spent 50 years in political service in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate as Secretary of State, was a candidate for president 3 times. You have people like John Breckinridge, whose statue stands across the way. He was vice president under President Buchanan, then a candidate for president in 1860 on the Southern Democratic ticket. But some of the more interesting people are really some of the lesser known, I think. People like John McKinney, who was a school teacher on this site where the courthouse is now, as early as 1783. There's a little marker over there, I think, indicating there was a schoolhouse there. McKinney is probably better known as Wildcat McKinney, because sometime in the 1780s, when he was getting ready to open school for the day, a wildcat came in the door of his schoolroom and attacked him. And he proceeded to wrestle with the wildcat and strangled it. And when help finally arrived, the wildcat was dead, but its claws and teeth were still embedded in McKinney. And the story is, and I'm sure it may be apocryphal, but the story is that McKinney was so shaken by the incident that he decided to dismiss school for that day. There are people like Constantine Rafinesque, who's well known among scientists, but not among the general public, who was a professor of natural sciences at Transylvania University. A very eccentric individual, but one who contributed immensely to the botanical and the zoological information at that time. A fellow who, for instance, proposed to build a botanical garden and an arboretum in Lexington in the 1820s. The exact same thing that the city and the University of Kentucky are now proposing to do much later. He eventually left Transylvania under a cloud. There was a lot of probably professional jealousy among his colleagues, plus the fact that he didn't attend his own classes very well. He would go off on field trips and be gone for 6 weeks at a time. I'm sure the students at Transylvania loved it, but the administration didn't take it very kindly. And he eventually left and supposedly put a cloud or a curse on Transylvania University. Someone many years later, after Rafinesque had been dead for a long time, found that he'd been buried in Philadelphia, and they thought it would be a good idea to disinter the body, bring it back, and he's now buried in the basement of Transylvania, or of Morrison Hall out of Transylvania. And there's the legend that every Halloween, or maybe on his birthday, I'm not sure which, but some brave students will volunteer to spend the night over the crypt so that Rafinesque can't escape and destroy the university. People like that, I think, are maybe not as important in the total picture, but certainly a lot more interesting. King Solomon, who was a hopeless derelict and the town drunk, but who, when in 1833 a very serious cholera epidemic struck Lexington, 300 people died in 2 weeks, including 3 doctors who were trying to treat it. There weren't enough people to dig graves, to dispose of the bodies. People who could wouldn't, because they feared contacting the disease. King Solomon dug graves almost around the clock. And he survived the epidemic. He never contacted cholera. Many years later, a fine tombstone was erected to him in the Lexington Cemetery because of his services. People like that, I think, make every county and city of this size are going to have their fair share of prominent people who are well known. But I think it's the thing that makes Lexington and Fayette County's history so rich, the fact that they have a lot of characters like the ones that I've just mentioned, who after all were common individuals, but who made the community and the society more unique. That tourism, of course, is one of our major industries here. I probably should have mentioned that when we were talking about the economy. To start right here in Lexington, within easy walking distance, you can absorb some of the magnificent history of the town and of the county. You can get an interesting contrast between the new and the old. For instance, we're standing here by the newest building, the Bank of Lexington. 2 blocks north of here is Gratz Park, which at one time was a part of the Transylvania University campus. Benjamin Gratz gave that lot to the college. In fact, it was originally called the Little College Lot. But around that, the perimeter of Gratz Park there are magnificent examples of antebellum architecture in homes, both the Federal and the Georgian style. You have the Hunt Morgan House, you have the Bodley House, which served as a headquarters of the Union Army during the Civil War when they occupied Lexington. You have the Gratz home. Benjamin Gratz was one of the early residents of Lexington. In fact, I believe the first millionaire in Kentucky. He came from Philadelphia, was a merchant. Further on, Transylvania University, founded in 1780, the oldest college west of the Allegheny Mountains. And on the Transylvania campus, there is the Robert Patterson Cabin, the fellow we spoke of who founded Lexington. We have there at one time, Transylvania had one of the finest medical schools in the country. As a matter of fact, they for a while had more students than Harvard Medical School. And they have in the library at Transylvania much of the old medical school library and the medical apparatus and equipment which they used in the school. Morrison Hall on the Transylvania University campus is an interesting historical building. It was built in the 1820s by Gideon Shyrock, who was one of the leading architects and who introduced the Greek Revival style into Kentucky. And it's interesting to note that for his services as an architect, he was paid in land. Transylvania University owned some land, I think, in what is now Franklin County, which they paid him for his services. And when the building was finished, he gave the college a guarantee for 17 years. And the building is done considerably better than that. But the whole area north of the downtown, around Gratz Park, on North Broadway, and in the other direction south of downtown on South Mill and Upper Street, is shrouded in history. Fortunately, there has been a strong historic commission, the Bluegrass Trust, which have been involved in saving historic structures. They haven't saved them all. They haven't saved a lot of them that they would have liked to. But I think it's been a decent compromise between the old and the new, and we have preserved some of our history here, which I think is fortunate.
Okay. Is there anything that you would like to say yourself about Fayette County?
Well, of course, there are outside of Lexington. There are a number of things that are of interest. Not far south of here is Walnut Hill Presbyterian Church, which is the oldest Presbyterian church still standing in the state. It was built in 1801. While we're talking about churches, one thing which interests me, in Lexington, you have 2 black churches that were established in 1790. Now, I'm talking about all black churches established in 1790, which made them the 5th and 6th oldest black churches in the entire United States. And those are churches that are still in existence. Pleasant Green, which is now in West Maxwell, and the first African Baptist, which is down this way, I believe, on the corner of Short and DeWeese. At one time, about 1850, the first African Baptist was the largest church in Kentucky, black or white. It was pastored by a man named Landon Farrell, who was a free black. And they had 1,800 members in 1850, largest church in the state. Of course, for people who are interested in horses, and that's a large part of the tourism, we have the horse park north between here and Georgetown, which depicts the entire history of the horse. We have many horse farms. You can go in any direction and see horse farms, some of which are open to the public. We have Keeneland Racetrack, which is really, I think, unique among racetracks in America. For the trotting fans, there's Red Mile here within the city. This area has always been very steeped in racing. In fact, the original racetrack in Lexington was down Broadway, which at that time was just a hardened piece of earth which had been trampled down by the buffaloes going back and forth, the old buffalo trace between here and the Salt Licks up at Maysville, near Maysville. And very shortly after settlement, they were having horse races on that course. The Ashland, of course, Henry Clay's home, which doesn't look today as it originally did. It was rebuilt in the 1850s after Clay died, but that's a major tourist attraction. And I'm sure there are many others which I slip my mind now, but those are some of them. I think they're worth seeing. For those who are of a more modern bent, athletics, very rich in tradition, of course. Rupp Arena right down the way here, Memorial Coliseum out on the university campus where some of the great Adolph Rupp teams played. And for those who like the new things, we have those too, with the new festival market here and Triangle Park and the Victorian Square shops, which are new but which are in an old preserved block of buildings, which makes it somewhat unique and interesting. This is the fifth courthouse of Fayette County, the fourth one on this exact same site. Now the first courthouse was constructed in 1782. It was a two-story log structure which sat at the corner of Broadway and Main. There's some discrepancy. Some sources say it was at the northwest corner, some say at the northeast corner. But at any rate, it was in that general area. By 1888, however, the county had grown to the point where they needed a bigger courthouse, and they moved to the present site, and a two-story stone building was erected. I've forgotten the exact dates, but that did not last for a great many years until it was replaced by a three-story brick structure. I believe about 1806 is when that courthouse was built. That was the third one. That remained until the 1880s. And then it was replaced by a larger stone structure, which did not look a great deal unlike the one we have today.